launch into our discussion of the Bible, we have to make some provisos and get some basic definitions out of the way. And there's no better place to start than with the word Bible itself. Our English word Bible comes from the Greek words ta biblia, which mean the books. It's a plural. Originally, it probably meant the scrolls. And we get the word biblia from the ancient Phoenician city of Byblos. It was probably from Byblos that Egyptian papyrus made its way to be transferred and traded into the Greek world. The Bible is, as its name appropriately says in Greek, a collection of various books. These various books were written by various authors over the span of more than 1,000 years. They were written in different languages, in different places, and to different audiences. Consequently, therefore, the books of the Bible have to be interpreted differently. Some authors wrote factually, in a very straightforward fashion. Other authors wrote poetically, symbolically. And perennially the problem has been in biblical interpretation that someone tries to apply the same method of interpretation to all the books of the Bible, when in fact they were not all written in the same fashion. When you indiscriminately apply one means of interpretation, you invariably get in trouble. It's like picking up a newspaper. It's one newspaper, but there are various sections of it. You don't go from the comics to the editorial page with the same suspension of belief. Well, maybe you do. That's a bad example. But you expect truth in the want ads, opinion in the editorials, and suspension of belief in the funnies. It's the same way. They're different parts of the same compact group, but they shouldn't be interpreted differently. So, for instance, when the author of Exodus speaks of the sea closing in upon Pharaoh's army, he means just that. And it is a waste of our time to try and rationalize and historicize this event. Why bother going looking for tidal waves from Santorini's eruption? Why bother dealing with the Reed Sea versus the Red Sea, or the proposition that there was a marshy land that the chariot wheels got stuck in and this got blown all out of proportion? That sort of academic gymnastics has no real place in biblical study. Now, it does not mean we have to accept at face value what the man says. Whether it's true or not is another question. We have to be interested in the fact is he is making this statement and he believes this statement to be true. And consequently, when the psalmist says God's truth reaches to the clouds, he's obviously speaking poetically. And we don't have to judge the height and the shape of clouds and the measurement of God's truth. And when Zechariah refers to 7 men as the eyes of the Lord, he obviously does not mean that God has 7 eyes or 7 sets of eyes. Common sense, you would think? You would think. But over the past 2,000 years, there have been astounding extremes of literalist and allegorical interpretation of the Bible in Judaism and Christianity that have given rise to some absolutely bizarre ideas about what the Bible has said. We also have to deal with the idea of translation and the transmission of the Bible. Let's all concede the Bible definitively is the Word of God. What Bible is definitively the Word of God? Where is the text that is the Word of God? The truth is, we have no original documents from any of the authors of the Bible. An original document, by the way, is called an autograph. We have, as far as we know, no autographs of any biblical book. What we have are copies of copies of copies ad infinitum of the original autograph. And in the copying and recopying of the Bible, inevitably, scribes made mistakes. Sometimes they even made deliberate changes. What happens when they leave something out? Well, if they catch it, fine and good. The point is here, if a scribe makes a mistake, and let's say it's a fundamental mistake, is that text still the Word of God? Mistake and all. And we will see how different Jewish and Christian holy men answered that question. That's the problem of transmission. But what about the problem of translation? Here we come to an even more difficult matter, because the better one learns a language and culture, the more one realizes how difficult translation actually is. And we are going to be going from Hebrew text to Greek text to Syriac text to Latin text to Ethiopic to Coptic. What happens every time the Bible is translated from one language to the next? We have essentially three distinct problems in dealing with translation. Number one is that certain words have specific connotations and implications that are not overtly stated. A good example is in the last presidential debates. Clinton and Dole were arguing about their economic plans. And every time Clinton referred to Dole's economic plan, he referred to it as a scheme, whereas he talked about his economic ideas as a plan. Now, in using the word scheme, there is the implication, unstated, that what the man is proposing is underhanded and devious, as opposed to his own plan, which is logical, rational, and well thought out. How do you translate that unstated implication if there is no direct vocabulary correspondence? A translator may well lose or miss the entire point in the translation. The second idea about translation is that words have a history to them. The example I always bring up is the word logos in Greek. Logos in Greek means, amongst other things, word. But the word logos has a 500-year history that goes along with it before John penned in the words, "In the beginning was the Word." Here, the translation of logos into word is perhaps the worst translation possible, because it means much more than just something that is uttered. Logos had come to mean in Greek philosophic circles a rational, organized principle to creation. And when you simply translate that concept, that long philosophic tradition, into the word word, you have completely obliterated 500 years of philosophic thought out of what John is trying to say. And as a consequence, you may sit there in the pews listening to a minister or priest talk inanely about what this word was that God had in the very beginning. The truth of the matter is that is not at all what John was trying to say. Then meanings of words change, sometimes drastically. Let's take two English sentences. Jane wanted to go to the store. John prevented her. If you saw those words in a 20th century context, you would understand it like this. Jane wanted to go to the store, and John stopped her from doing that. If, however, those words had been penned in a 17th century context, it would mean Jane wanted to go to the store and John preceded her or went before her. In other words, the word prevent in English has taken on almost an opposite meaning of the way it was originally used. Okay, a common, ordinary example. Let's take it back to biblical interpretation and translation. In Isaiah 7:14, there is a prophecy which says, "Behold, the almah shall conceive and bear a son." Most English translations now have it, "Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son." Let's look at how that word has changed from language to language. Almah in Hebrew means young girl, nothing more than that. The implication is, of course, that a young girl is a virgin, but that's unstated. When the Bible was translated into Greek, they translated almah into parthenos. Parthenos in Greek can mean young girl, maiden, or an unmarried girl. When parthenos is used as an adjective, it means chaste or unmarried. It usually, in Greek literature, means a virgin, but it can be used to describe a young, unmarried woman who is not a virgin. And that's the way, for instance, Homer uses it in the Iliad. But when parthenos is translated into Latin, it is translated as virgo. And virgo in Latin means virgin. It refers to a biological condition of a woman, and when virgo is used as an adjective, it means unused or unmarried. Has our translators now captured the original intention of the author? Has the same idea been kept from almah to parthenos to virgo to virgin? Or have some changes occurred in our understanding of the passage as the phrase went from language to language? With regard to translation, how does translation affect the text of being the Word of God? We are going to deal in some detail with the most famous of all Bible translations, the Septuagint, where reputedly King Ptolemy of Egypt asked the 72 scholars from Jerusalem to translate the Bible from Hebrew to Greek, and it was declared eventually to be a miraculous, divinely inspired translation. We'll deal with that translation in some detail. We will examine the stances taken by Jewish and Christian scholars on the matter of translation. We come now finally to the matter of interpretation. This is the absolute crux of the whole issue, and it is a major focal point of the entire course. Jews and Christians both read a set of writings that Christians refer to as the Old Testament. But although reading the same thing, they see two different things. The Jews see the story of their relationship with God. The Christians see God's plan of salvation culminating in Jesus Christ. The Christian believes that everything in the Old Testament points to Jesus, and needless to say, the Jews do not agree with that particular interpretation. So we are essentially dealing with the same texts, but every time a new set of eyes looks upon that text, a different interpretation comes up.